Welcome. What you are about to hear is an exploration of one of the most fascinating chapters in the intellectual history of humanity, the age of the world religions. Long before Christianity became the faith of empires, long before Islam united continents, something extraordinary was happening across the ancient world. From the plains of Persia to the forests of Gaul, from the banks of the Ganges to the streets of Rome, men and women were asking the same great questions. What is truth? Who made this universe? Do the gods care about us? What happens when we die? These questions gave rise to many great systems of thought: Chaldaean astrology, Persian Zoroastrianism, Indian Buddhism, Stoicism, Judaism, Christianity, and Druidism. All of these movements shared something deep. They broke through the walls of tribe and nation and spoke to all of humanity. This is the story of that stirring. Great achievements are born of strong convictions. The Romans, who built roads connecting the ends of the earth, who carried clean water into crowded cities, who converted enemies into neighbors, these men and women were not merely practical. They were driven by deep inner convictions about the nature of reality. Yet Roman writers often concealed their real thoughts behind convention. Their genuine wrestling with the great questions surfaced only occasionally, in the unguarded speech of common people, in bursts of poetic imagination, or in writing meant for the young. What were these questions? What is truth, and how can we know it? Do the gods concern themselves with human affairs? What is man's nature, his duty, his destiny? These questions, when answered in practical form and followed by great numbers of people, became religions. Stoicism began as a philosophy, but as its reach grew, it took on all the features of a religion. Roman literature is thick with allusions to Stoicism and its rivals, a testimony to how deeply these questions were felt. The Romans learned philosophy from the Greeks, and yet the Greeks themselves had received it from elsewhere. Many of their greatest early teachers were immigrants from Asia Minor. Greece was only a stopping point in a much longer journey. Aristotle noted that the Magi taught philosophy to the Persians. The Chaldeans taught it to the Babylonians. The Gymnosophists taught it to the Indians, and the Druids transmitted it to the Gauls and Celts. This was a worldwide stirring of the human intellect, breaking across every border. Before philosophy came nationalism, each people worshipping the deity who fought in their armies and lived within their borders. Philosophy swept away those barriers and spoke to the individual conscience. Wherever it arrived, it struck at patriotism and piety, challenging kings and priests alike. But everywhere it also began to build something new, a new piety, a new religion, marked by a universal outlook, reverence for reason, and the sentiment of human sympathy. The Chaldeans were among the earliest, a star-gazing people who, around 2800 BC, mapped the constellations and traced the orbits of the planets. They believed the heavens carried a written message for humanity. Two principles survived from their teaching: the inexorable link between cause and effect, fate, and the interdependence of events in heaven and on earth. From these arose astrology, and the astrologer became a common figure throughout the Roman world, finding his way into the chambers of princes and the councils of conspirators. Persianism, the teaching of Zarathustra, grew from an older nationalism into something universal, because what began as a conflict between races transformed into a struggle between right and wrong. Zarathustra taught that Ahura Mazda, a great and wise being, was the creator and ruler of heaven and earth. Ahura was light, his enemy darkness. Every soul must choose a side, and after death would cross the bridge of judgment, turning right toward paradise or left into the house of falsehood. This doctrine of divine governance and the immortality of the soul moved Rome deeply. Cicero retold the dying words of Cyrus the Persian. The soul, Cyrus argued, is most fully itself when freed from the body, most divine in sleep, most knowing in death. Buddhism came to the Roman world in disguise. The near-naked wandering sages whom Alexander encountered in India showed the Buddhist spirit, contempt for luxury, deep sympathy with human suffering, indifference to the national gods. The Buddha's Sermon of Benares offered a radical diagnosis. All life is sorrow. Sorrow arises from desire, and the eightfold path leads to release. Though no formal Buddhist communities appeared in the West, the Cynic preachers carried that spirit into the Greco-Roman world, ragged, homeless, scorned, and yet deeply respected. Epictetus described Diogenes this way: all the earth was his country. He became familiar with the pirates and tried to improve them. Thus is freedom acquired. Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium, was the system that took deepest root in Rome. It taught an unchanging destiny that orders all events from eternity. It worshipped a supreme deity, made known to us as the divine word, the Logos, and it held that true happiness comes only in subordinating individual desire to universal reason. Its influence on Roman law, government, and ethics was without equal. A French writer of the 18th century said it simply: Stoicism alone knew how to make citizens. It alone produced great men. It alone produced great emperors. Judaism was deeply shaped by its encounter with Persia, two faiths united by belief in a God of heaven and rejection of idol worship. As Jewish thought developed at Alexandria in dialogue with Greek philosophy, it produced the wisdom of Solomon, which personified wisdom as a spirit of God, an effulgence from everlasting light, and an unspotted mirror of the working of God. In Philo, the Jew, Greek and Jewish thought fused completely as he found the Logos, the divine word, woven through the scriptures of his ancestors. Christianity arrived in a world already saturated with these ideas. The Lord's Prayer reflects the central conceptions of Parsism. The Sermon on the Mount echoes the Buddhist sermon of Benares. Paul of Tarsus was formed in a city that had produced great Stoic teachers, and the Gospel of John opens with the Stoic doctrine of the Word made flesh. The early church writers felt this kinship even when they could not explain it. They said that Cicero, in his Stoic writings, was a soul naturally Christian. Druidism, the least known of these systems, shared with Parsism its belief in the immortality of the soul. The poet Lucan captured its spirit. If you know well what you say, then death is but an interlude in life.
Druids, like Stoics, seem to have prepared their peoples for a ready acceptance of Christianity.